So here's your weekly reminder that Mars Red is perfection and deserves far more praise than it's getting. This show, I think, is so good, and it's always disappointing to see a show that you love not get the same type of recognition that you personally think it deserves. But this show is so good, and once again, just hits me so well with what it's trying to deliver with its narrative. While there are vampires a part of the story, rather than it just being creatures of the night sucking blood and causing chaos, it's a personal story where on the government side you're building a military and some people are getting kind of up in arms that it's taking too long and other countries are surpassing them. It'd make far more sense to use them for intelligence warfare rather than hand-to-hand combat, given that they'll burn up in sunlight. And then you have these personal moments like one of our soldiers here who just recently became a vampire, having to figure out what to do, knowing that his wife is now kind of in a state of not knowing how to basically move on peacefully. This episode was so good, and I truly feel like each episode has gotten progressively better. Episode 1, great introduction. Last week, get us on board with the characters. And this week actually shows what the more emotional, personal side can do, while also showing us a lot of substance with the military and divisions and things like that. I do want to quickly mention our boy Maida here, because he lost an arm after last week's episode, and I thought that was the first time it ever happened, but people actually pointed out how in the very first episode, there's a conversation where Maida talks about having lost his arm before. So the reason why he was so reckless with getting kind of like throwing his arm inside a vampire's mouth was actually because he's had it replaced before. Probably cost an arm and a leg, but I mean, given the fact of his role, it's probably part of the perks of being the commander of the Code Zero unit, so the fact that they have mechanical body parts like that complex is really interesting given the time period and the type of technology we've seen so far. I think the idea of the goodbye scene is probably my favorite part of the episode. I'm a sucker for anything that has like an emotional goodbye where obviously a character clearly doesn't deserve the fate they're given, and even though I thought he was a bit of a loudmouth and kind of had his head up his own ass last week, I also saw the potential in him being a real genuine character. And I mean, given the fact that we see that, you know, he has regrets as a husband, but it doesn't change the fact that he loved his wife, and now he's tasked with never being able to see her again, because this isn't a vampire story where in a traditional vampire story, you can suck the blood of anyone and they'll just become it, right? Or you give them your blood and they become a vampire, right? No, this is a story where very few people are capable of turning, so if he was to ever attempt to turn his wife into a vampire so they could be together eternally, it's most likely just going to kill her in a very brutal way. So everything about that is just so heartbreaking, and the idea of them presenting themselves as ghosts I think is really interesting, given one of the soldiers' kind of like teleportation ability. The way they come in and out of contact with people very much can look like a spirit kind of moving around and will freak you out. So having a simple moment where they're lighting the candles there and kind of like setting them off in the river, him getting to say his goodbyes and make his peace, and I thought it was so sweet, and it was so, I guess bittersweet would probably be the best word to say, just his goodbye saying, you know, if you're ever having trouble with money, sell my junk, you know, it's not worth keeping on in memories if you're gonna starve, and she's saying, I'll never get rid of it, I mean, I'm not doing that bad, or if you want to remarry, you can, and she's saying, I'm always going to be yours. Those are the types of relationships that just really hit me deep in the heart, and I'm like, that's so just genuine love that even if these two may not have had the best marriage, you know, she loved him till death do us part, and, you know, until she's dead, she's never gonna forget, she's never gonna move on, which I think is really, really beautiful. And the fact that they kind of make a promise that every year he would come and visit her as a spirit when really he's a vampire is just so great, and I think that's one of the ways that they're using vampires in a non-traditional way. Anime, books, television series anymore, it's all just about the rawr, here's the vampire, they're gonna suck your blood. Here we're saying it's, you know, there's a lot of times that if this was a real concept, a lot of people would be ripped away from their families. What can you do? How can you say goodbye? And they use it in such a realistic way given the spirituality and everything and how they believe in spirits. It makes total sense and a great way to depart the dead. It's just so beautiful and tragic, and seriously, I love this show, and the characters are really starting to shine after we got introduced to them. I think Maida and his role is pretty interesting given that he is completely overworked. I mean, the man doesn't sleep. He's commanding his unit, then he's going on to briefings, and to just see the arguing between the military and the higher-ups in this government and chain, I think is so realistic, where you can tell the boredom from his face, you can tell, like, this is human hours. Human hours is this bullshit that I have to listen to. But I think the person above Maida who actually promoted him, I really like his idea of how he's saying there's been so many young men who have died for this project. If I was to give it up now, their death would have been for nothing, and I can't do that because they're pretty much saying like there's like the concept of a vampire unit is really good because a single soldier could be worth an entire army. The issue is that once they're in sunlight, they're immediately dead. So wouldn't it make more sense to just use your army in the dark, take people out? And it feels like there's a lot of conflicting beliefs on what to use this Code Zero unit for, where they feel like over time they will build a unit that is completely indestructible and will be able to keep the peace and they'll never have to worry about wars and things like that. But you have other governments and other divisions who have used them more for information warfare because, one, you can gain information from the shadows, you don't have to worry about attacking head on as you advance your other types of military. And they even bring up in this episode that the fact that military kind of personnels and the idea of promoting your military is growing weaker and weaker in the public's eye, so they're kind of at a standstill. While politics and military and that type of conversation may not be everyone's cup of tea, I think it's really important to have it, and the way they're presenting it in this show doesn't feel dry or boring in the slightest. And I think one of the biggest reasons is actually the color palette that they use. The backgrounds to the character models, everything about it. There's always been a cinematic feel to it, even ignoring the widescreen aspect about the show. The way they present everything, there's nothing boring, I think, about this show. The OST continues to suck you in. There's like the main theme that they keep redoing in different ways with different instruments that always kicks off or plays throughout the episode. There's bagpipes at one point in one of the soundtracks. Like, there's so much variety about the music to really capture a very familiar yet completely different setting than what we're typically used to, even from our own history or other stories that have tackled something very similar. And I actually really love the idea that they kick off the episode with them chasing seemingly a vampire, and it just turned out to be a normal human. There's actually risk with how they use their kind of personnel. Like, they even say, like, it's a good thing we didn't kill him because we thought he was a vampire, because he really was just a normal human. Or even just dropping the information that pretty much everyone has a record in the city, so if anyone presumes you to be a vampire, they'll throw you in the sunlight, no questions asked, because why would a human have anything to fear about going into the sun? So there's a lot of, like, interesting aspects about the world. While this episode is really focusing in on the personality, I mean, I loved Maida from last week and even episode 1, but I really feel like, given how they're presenting characters now, I really feel like this is going to be a cast of characters that maybe you look at a mad scientist at a first glance as a mad vampire scientist, but you can look at this episode and say, like, for him, that's the greatest thing ever. He gets to have unlimited knowledge, a brain that never ages, and you'll be able to be like Odin, where he kind of has the information of the universe on the palm of his hands. Or a man who just wants to say goodbye to his wife and not leave her starving or hopeless. There's so much personality behind a story that should be nothing if we go by most vampire stories out there, but I truly believe that Mars Red will be one of the best vampire anime that the medium has seen. And while the bar isn't necessarily that high for vampire stories, especially in the anime medium, I don't think it takes away from the quality that we're currently experiencing. It's personal, the action's great when it's there, the mechanics are interesting, the world's interesting, the art's great, the animation's great when they get into those action scenes. Everything about the production I love, and I truly believe it deserves a lot more hype than it's currently getting. I appreciate everyone who's been supporting the videos. They've been doing pretty well, all things considered, given that not a lot of people seem to be talking about this. So I really appreciate all the likes, the comments, everything like that. It does mean a lot, so thank you so much. And as always, let me know your thoughts and feelings down below, your favorite moment, whatever you're feeling. Drop a like if you enjoyed, and of course subscribe if you're new around here. So until next time, everyone, please take care and have a good one.